Alright, let's talk about end host mode and connecting end host mode to upstream disjointed layer 2 domains. So these would be two different layer 2 networks. Could be, for example, two different DMZs that you've decided to connect UCS to, a single UCS pod, and you're in end host mode. So some folks have attempted to do this and run into a problem, and we'll discuss that here briefly. So you have multiple uplinks out of the 6100, as we know, and you may think to yourself, well, what I'll do is I'll take a couple of uplinks, put those on DMZ1, create a static pin group for that, and I'll take the other uplinks and put that on DMZ2 and create another static pin group there, and just make sure the right servers are in the right pin groups, and I'll be set, right? Well, it may appear to work initially, but there are some problems with this implementation. And the key problem that you're going to face here is that the 6100, when in host mode, assumes that all of its uplinks are in the same common upstream layer 2 domain. And when it does that, it picks one of its links, irrespective of any static pinning that you've set up. It picks one of its links to be the broadcast listener. So in this case, 6100A here has picked this link on DMZ1 to listen to all broadcasts for all VLANs. And 6100B over here just happens to have chosen this link here going to DMZ2 to be its broadcast listener. This is just something basically randomly chosen by the Fabric Interconnect, and we really don't have any influence over that. So if you have servers from different networks underneath UCS, so we've got servers from DMZ1 and DMZ2 in here, we're going to run into some problems. First of all, DMZ server 2 down here, which is attached to 6100A, is not going to be able to see any of the broadcasts from DMZ2. So if there's any other servers that are attached to DMZ2 out there that are sending broadcasts trying to ARP for DMZ server 2 down here, that connectivity will be broken. So you'll see that problem right away. Another problem that might sneak up on you later on is some of the servers reaching their default gateway. So when I initially power on this server down here, this DMZ2 server, he's going to ARP for his default gateway, so that's a broadcast message that will go up to the 6100 here, and that broadcast will be forwarded out the pinned up link, so it will successfully reach the layer 3 gateway in DMZ2, and DMZ2 will send a unicast response back down to the server, and everything will be working just fine. However, if and when the ARP entry times out on the upstream switch here, and it has to be relearned, when these upstream switches ARP for the MAC address of DMZ2 server, that will be a broadcast request, and that broadcast will be sent down all the links, but it will be discarded on 6100A because that broadcast was received on a link that is not the broadcast listener. The broadcast listener is over here on DMZ1. So that's a problem that might creep up on you later on. You might think that IP connectivity to the rest of the world is working just fine, but as soon as an ARP entry times out on a server, on a switch, a few hours later, things suddenly start to break. So moral of the story here is end host mode with version 1.4 or earlier of UCS Manager assumes that all links are connected to the same upstream layer 2 domain. And so connecting UCS in end host mode to separate layer 2 domains is going to be problematic. Now the next version of UCS Manager is going to enhance end host mode to deal with this implementation appropriately. But if you're running version 1.4 or older, this is something that you need to watch out for. One of the ways to attach UCS to separate upstream layer 2 domains with any version of UCS Manager is to convert the Fabric Interconnect to switch mode. So in switch mode, as we know, the Fabric Interconnect acts and behaves like a normal layer 2 switch on all interfaces and performs MAC learning on all interfaces and uses VLAN-based forwarding logic for the uplinks. So now we can take multiple uplinks out of our Fabric Interconnect and attach it to the two separate upstream domains. And we'll work with the assumption here that each layer 2 network has its own unique VLAN space. So we have DMZ1 here as an example, VLANs 20 through 30, DMZ2 example here, VLANs 40 through 50. And then we go ahead and define all of the VLANs on the Fabric Interconnect and Switch mode. So we have really built a common Layer 2 domain here. This is looking like a typical Layer 2 switch with all the VLANs defined. Now when we're in switch mode, the uplinks are forwarding for all VLANs. This is not something that we can prune at the Fabric Interconnect. So to create the separation here, we need to make sure that we are pruning VLANs at the upstream switch and that we're tagging for all VLANs. So for example, all the VLANs 20 through 50 are being tagged by the Fabric Interconnect, and I did that because I defined some other VLAN as the default VLAN. Let's just say VLAN 1 for example. So I know that all VLANs are being tagged, and then I'm pruning appropriately at the upstream switch to make sure that there is no Layer 2 joining that's happening through the Fabric Interconnect from one DMZ to the other. We could potentially leverage VPC on these upstream domains to get all links forwarding for all VLANs, just to get all paths available. But ultimately what we were able to achieve here was creating a common Layer 2 domain with a Layer 2 switch connected to both networks, and that was by converting the Fabric Interconnect to switch mode. And there is no concept of a broadcast listener link that would create any problems with any servers seeing or not seeing broadcasts that they should be seeing. Another way that you can attach UCS to separate upstream Layer 2 domains would be to insert a Layer 2 switch, a common Layer 2 domain, in between your Fabric Interconnect and your two upstream Layer 2 domains. Now there might be two reasons why you would do this. One reason that we're showing here is, if you remember on the previous slide, we had the luxury of having no overlapping VLANs between the two different upstream networks. But in this scenario here, we do. We've got VLANs 20 through 30 defined in each separate layer or each separate Layer 2 domain. So to get around that, what we can do is we can insert a Layer 2 switching environment in between the Fabric Interconnects and those upstream networks, and this Layer 2 switch supports a feature called VLAN translation. So what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to translate VLAN tags as they flow through this Layer 2 switch. So down here at the Fabric Interconnect, we've defined VLANs 20 through 30 and VLANs 200 through 210. And VLANs 200 through 210 are translated to VLANs 20 through 30 as they egress up to this other DMZ number 2 up here. So DMZ number 2 is only going to see tags for VLANs 20 through 30, just like it's expecting. But down here in the UCS Manager Fabric Interconnect, we've been able to change that to a unique VLAN space. Another reason why you might insert a Layer 2 switch in between the two upstream domains and UCS would be to keep the Fabric Interconnects in end host mode. Remember, we discussed that there's some advantages to end host mode over switch mode, such as optimized MAC learning, right? The interconnect only needs to learn MAC addresses for the servers below it and doesn't care about anything up here in the upstream network. So if you're inserting this into a very large data center environment, it might be a concern, and you might want to keep the Fabric Interconnect in end host mode. Another thing here is we have the ability to, all links forwarding for all VLANs out of the Fabric Interconnect with end host mode that provides. And this could be a temporary workaround. Remember, I said earlier that in versions 1.4 or older of UCS Manager, we have the problem with end host mode connecting directly to separate Layer 2 domains. But that is something that's going to be fixed in the next version of UCS Manager. So this could be a temporary solution just until you're comfortable with deploying the new version of UCS Manager with the enhancement of end host mode to deal with separate upstream Layer 2 domains.